So the issue of what was going to happen to him after we are no longer able to do what we do or after we die has been, I would say, for the last 20 years or more, the central issue of my life and my husband's life.
G'day, I'm Debra Caldow. Welcome to the Red Giraffe Solutions Expanding Worlds podcast, where we aim to support you as you help your young person with additional needs plan for their future, a future where they're safe, secure, and live a rewarding and fulfilling life. From around the world, I share stories and I share solutions from people making this possible right now. I'm a parent of a young person with additional needs, so I understand the challenges. Many of the people I've interviewed on this podcast have already helped me design a better future for my daughter, and I hope that they might help you as well to imagine what's possible for your young person. This podcast is made possible by Red Giraffe Solutions, which is a project I'm proud to be part of, supporting families to build a better future for their children. We now have available at Red Giraffe Solutions an online course called Independent Cooking Made Easy. This is a new and unique approach we developed when we realised traditional cooking techniques and recipes were never going to enable our daughter to cook without some support or supervision. It's a safe, simple system that uses no more than 5 ingredients, has no weighing, cutting or chopping, and no lifting of heavy dishes. Each of the 16 recipes in the course includes a step-by-step video of our daughter making the meal, plus a visual recipe card. We developed this for our daughter to solve her challenges with cooking, and every recipe in the course she can and does genuinely cook for herself. You can find a link to the course in this episode's show notes. In this week's episode, the topic is hope. And by that I mean both the hope we all have for our children's futures, but also it's the name of the organisation I'm talking about with my guest, Ginny Dropkin from Hope, North Carolina. Housing is always one of those topics I like coming back to, in part because it's one of the areas where, for my daughter, we're still looking for the right solution. To be honest though, the story Ginny shares is not a new one. No local housing options, so families working together to find a solution. But the story is also unique because there are ideas and experiences in here that I believe by her sharing will help others see what is possible with persistence. And I'm sure after you listen to Ginny, many of the things she says will resonate with you, as they did with me, particularly when it comes to the roller coaster we often find ourselves on, where it can feel like 1 step forward, then 2 steps back. Ginny is not only one of the most determined women I've ever spoken to, she was also incredibly modest about her role in helping to create a model that I hope others will look at and use as an example of how an inclusive community should look. Also, just to say that the Laura that Ginny talks about in our conversation is Laura Wells, who's the Executive Director of Hope, North Carolina, and Laura is my guest in next week's episode. So enough from me, let's hear from Ginny. Ginny, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. Can we start off by just hearing a little bit about you and then also talking about the organisation that you co-founded?
Okay, my name is Ginny Dropkin. I'm 76 years old. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. Originally, I'm from Cuba, and I came to the United States when I was 13. I lived in New York, in Brooklyn, for about 10 years, and then my husband and I got married and came down to North Carolina for what was going to be 1 year and then go back to New York. And 53 years later, we're still here. So that's how we got to North Carolina, and we really enjoy living here. But as far as services for people with disabilities, this is not a great state, but I'll get back to that. I have a master's in social work, so I worked as a therapist for 6 or 7 years and then decided, especially after my son was born, that I didn't want to go back to doing that kind of work. In the interim, I've done different things. I've been an accountant, and then I worked in home mortgages and loss mitigation. The last 20 years or so of my career, I retired about 6 years ago. I was working as an interpreter, a Spanish interpreter in the courts. That's been my most recent career. And then I sort of slowly retired when I was 69 or so. And I've always been very active in trying to figure out what's going to happen. I have a son who's almost 44, and he has autism. and he appears to be more independent than he is. So people who don't really know him don't really see the kinds of needs that he has, because my husband and I basically support his life in such a way that he is living in his own apartment. He's been living in his own apartment for over 5 years, and he can manage, but he can manage only because of all the work we do behind the scenes. For example, he doesn't pay bills, he doesn't make doctor's appointments, he doesn't go to doctor's appointments, he doesn't know how to order things online, things like that. So he's living a good life, we think. And he's very active, he's very busy, he's very sociable. So he's living what we would consider a good life. But I think it's only a good life because of all the supports behind the scenes. So the issue of what was going to happen to him after we are no longer able to do what we do or after we die has been, I would say, for the last 20 years or more, the central issue of my life and my husband's life. In a state that really doesn't provide the services that I think people with disabilities need in order to continue living a good life. I've been involved in a number of organizations over the years that are supposedly dealing with this issue. What comes next? And inevitably, after a number of years of parents working together, we give up because we realize how difficult this is and how many things we didn't know about how do you run any kind of facility or any place, because parents who have children with disabilities are most of the time overwhelmed and exhausted. It's difficult to put in the time and the energy and the research that it takes to get something off the ground. So, after a number of failed attempts, in 2018, I met two other women whose names are Dottie and Aura. We had been to a number of the same meetings over time, so we had seen each other. And the organization we were actually involved with at the time started out to be a housing advocacy group. But again, it's such an overwhelming thing to try to figure out what to do and how to set it up. That organization, which is still in existence, has become more of a information gathering, advocacy, networking kind of group, but not really focused on housing per se. So Dottie, Aura, and I met at Aura's house one day in July of 2018 and decided we're going to do something about this. They also have sons. One of them has a son who's maybe 35, the other maybe 39. And we decided we were going to do something about this, and we were going to create a community that was going to be diverse, affordable, inclusive, and ideally, we were going to live there too. So it was going to be a lovely community where people know each other and people help each other out. Somewhat of a fairy tale, but at the time it didn't appear to be a fairy tale. We became co-founders of the organization we called HOPE. And HOPE stands for Housing Options for People with Exceptionalities. Eventually, we were sorry that we called it HOPE because too many other organizations use HOPE for different things. So we've been confused with many different organizations, but by then it was almost too late to go back and change. We had created all kinds of publicity and things like that. I went into this with some optimism and hope, but in some ways thinking this is probably going to fall off the wayside just like everything else, but I have to try whatever there is out there. I just feel like this is the main passion and main cause of my life. So we started out, and that was 2018. I would say the first 6 months in 2018 and all of 2019, we really were spinning our wheels a lot because none of us has had any experience in finance and real estate and development and any of those things. And we had many different ideas and many different conversations that we had with many people. And it's the kind of thing where you start something and you talk to someone who then says, oh, but you must talk to so and so. And then you talk to so and so who says, oh, my friend has some land. Since we're beginning something so huge, we are trying to make connections. The networking part of things is really the first part of this kind of thing, and trying to recruit other parents. So we had meetings at the library. So Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill are three cities that are within half an hour of each other and have become sort of one. So we try to recruit parents from each one of these places. and had a number of meetings, and many parents were interested. And we did surveys about who wanted to live where and what kind of housing did you want for your child. And eventually, after trying for a long time to recruit other parents, it was the three of us who were going to do it. Lots of parents are interested and they fill out forms and whatever, but once you want people to work with you, no, they basically it's when you have something, let me know. I'll be right there. Put me first on the list. It's discouraging. And this would have been the time when hope would have fallen apart. But these two women are the two most amazing people I have ever met in my life. They have energy and wisdom and tenaciousness and persistence like nobody ever that I have seen. They're also very technologically adept, so they knew how to make a website and have a newsletter. Many times I felt like I was running as fast as I could, but I wasn't keeping up. But for whatever reason, I stuck with it. We also at some point connected with a consultant who, out of the goodness of his heart, was willing to work pro bono because we didn't have a penny to pay anyone. And I think the fact that this housing consultant, who was already involved in similar organizations in other parts of the United States, that he was willing to take us seriously and was willing to meet with us and help us come up with a strategy. To me, that sort of changed everything. Because here we were three women who were not professionals in the field of what we were trying to do. And there was this man with experience who had already helped other parents do this, and he didn't laugh at us. He really thought that we had a good idea and helped us visualize strategies and write down a lot of steps that we had not been doing. So I think his help was essential in giving us credibility even with ourselves. And then he also would make suggestions about meeting with the people in the affordable housing department in Chapel Hill and the town council member in Raleigh. And every time we had these meetings, our world expanded. We met more people and everybody was supportive. Everybody thought, what a wonderful idea. How come nobody has done this yet? And we wanted to succeed. Are you going to work with us? No. Are you going to give us any money? No. But we just kept at it and it became a full-time job for the three of us. Then COVID came, March of 2020. No more meetings in person. And that could have been a time when we closed the door, but we didn't. And actually, during 20 and 21, everything we did was on Zoom. During all this time, we kept changing our vision as we talked to more people, as we learned more. And I think what really hit us in the face is that developers who build mostly affordable housing were not really interested in talking to us. They would talk to us and they would wish us well, but they were not interested in being part of this. This area of North Carolina is a booming area. So land that is well located, meaning close to transportation, to a grocery store, to a drugstore, etc., could be millions of dollars per acre. There's no way to make money to build anything if first you have to pay $8 million just for the land. So it wasn't a good business proposition. And that's the part that I think when we started out, we had no idea that good land, well located land, was so scarce and so expensive. So the more we talked to developers, the more we felt like doors were closing and we didn't know which way to go. But we still continued on. I think with a clear sense that we're exploring every possibility that comes our way and we're talking to anybody who will talk to us, learning so much along the way. 2021, we applied for a grant and actually got a $40,000 grant. And for us, that was like the world had just expanded because then we were able to hire this consultant for real. He was working with us on a weekly basis. And then a couple of wonderful things happened at the same time that I think changed everything. One is Laura had just moved from Florida. After living in Florida for about 20 years, she wanted to come back to North Carolina. She came to North Carolina around the time when COVID started. So when she got settled into her new home and all that and would have wanted to look for a job, it was in the middle of COVID. So she was looking for something to do. And because she also has a master's in social work, she reconnected with the School of Social Work, who somehow connected her to us. That changed everything, in my opinion, because Laura had already done this kind of work in Florida. So she had already started a similar organization and had been on the board of a similar organization in Florida. The group that she was involved with is called LARSH. It's basically the same model that we had in mind, where people with and without disabilities live together. And it's also basically a lifelong commitment. So it's not a program, it's really a lifelong commitment to supporting someone with disabilities and helping them have as good a life as possible. Laura started working with us as a volunteer, and she really came with good ideas, with good questions, because she had already been through this. And in some ways, really helped us to get ourselves together in a more professional kind of way. Then, after maybe a year and a half, we got another grant, which is a grant that we still have. It's a 4 or 5 year grant. We're counting on the fifth year. So once we got that grant, we were able to actually hire Laura. And that is when she became our executive director. That in many ways changed things, because here we were, the three co-founders who had been running the show, not super well, but we were running the show. And now someone came in to be the executive director. That was a hard shift. That was a very hard shift for three co-founders who, as Dottie used to say, we birthed this baby and now somebody else wants to do something else. So it was a hard transition. So I think having Laura come to us, getting the grant that supports, I think, half of her salary, and the other half we have fundraising and things like that. The third thing that happened, this woman, her name is Anne, happened to be Dottie's neighbor. One of her daughters had a PhD in some kind of housing and affordable housing area. So we met with her. This is all on Zoom. And she connected us to a couple of affordable housing developers who were very interested in working with us. And that also was amazing to us, that not only are we being taken seriously, now we have an executive director, and now we have two different affordable housing developers who are telling, oh, we want to work with you. So that was just unbelievable. So after many meetings, etc., we chose this one company, and they're called Preservation of Affordable Housing, POAH, POA. And POA has a lot of experience in building affordable housing units using all kinds of federal money. This is called LIHTC, Low Income Housing Tax Credits. This is federal money that the federal government invests in affordable housing properties. And by providing these tax advantages and all kinds of other seed money, developers such as POA are able to build communities that are affordable because they've gotten this money at a lower rate. And they typically also depend on either town-owned land that the city of Durham, Raleigh, whatever, Chapel Hill, all these cities have land that they own themselves. And if they are interested in creating more affordable housing, which they all are, then they are willing to work with a developer to either give them the land for nothing or for an extremely low rate. So we thought, okay, now that we found our developer and they have experience doing this kind of work, we can get this done. It hasn't been so easy for a number of reasons, basically because we haven't found land. And also, whenever we would have any recommendations for land, the land has to be perfect in order to qualify for those credits. These credits are not going to be given unless it is the perfect land. And perfect land has not been found yet. So there we were. Clearly, we're not going to be able to build a community from the ground up yet. So we felt we had to pivot. This is the part of the story where I think Laura will pick up. What did we do then? But that's still the dream. That's still the dream that we have and that we hope we will be able to fulfill. But in the meantime, we're doing other things. What unfortunately has happened is that in 2023, Dottie left. She now lives in Massachusetts. She did a lot of research and eventually figured out that Massachusetts was one of the states that provided the best services in the United States. And she's originally from New England, so eventually she moved, which was at a tremendous personal cost because of the connection she had here, but she's there and has been pleased with what's going on. 2024, Aura left. She now lives in New Jersey. Ora also has a son who needed a great deal of care, and she had applied for the waiver. I don't know if you're familiar with the waiver. The waiver is federal money, Medicaid money, that is allotted to the different state agencies. And then they are the ones who administer who gets what services. So Ora waited 13 years for her son to get the waiver. And when he finally got the waiver, she couldn't find anybody to take care of him. There were no people. And this is a story I hear constantly, that parents whose adult children have the waiver cannot find anybody to work during those hours. There's nobody to do it. So they're still at home. And the mother usually is the one who's providing these services. So it's a horrible, broken system. And as we all contemplate getting older and figuring out what our children need to live without us, being dependent on a system that doesn't really give you any sense of assurance is untenable. And in her situation, she was originally from New Jersey. She had family in New Jersey, and they had wanted to retire here, but then decided this was not sustainable. So she left. So unfortunately, out of the three co-founders, I'm the only one left. And the reason both of them left is because it became very clear that in order for a model like Hope to succeed, services have to be not only there, but reliable, stable, professional, and that does not exist in North Carolina. Thankfully, we have Laura, and she keeps us together. She really does. She's an amazing person who has a lot of vision. So I feel very comfortable that what's happening with Hope is we're doing the best we can, given that this is the way it is in this state. On a personal note, my son has been living alone on his own apartment and doing really well for about 5.5 years. We are on the wait list for the waiver. We've been on it for about 6 years, so who knows when and if he'll get it. But we still run into the same situation. Even if he gets it, whatever number of hours he's entitled to services, will there be anybody there to do it? Who is going to be in charge of all this? There is nobody in charge. And that is so frightening. And that is my constant fear, that unless I can put something in place where I know, and because I don't have other children and don't have family, I have some family, but not much, and nobody who has stepped up and said, I'm going to be there for Aaron, what's going to happen? And so this is my daily routine of just worrying about it and talking to anybody who will talk to me and trying to figure out if there are ways of planning using maybe private services and things like that, which of course costs a lot of money. So it's just so complicated and so discouraging and so disheartening. At the same time, that I feel very good about what Hope is accomplishing and what we're doing and the noise that we're making and how many people in North Carolina have heard of us and the way that we've created North Carolina Inclusive Housing Coalition, where we meet on Zoom every other month with about 20 other organizations that are doing the same thing we're doing in different ways, trying to do it in different ways. But still, the ultimate goal is to increase the availability and options of housing for people with intellectual disabilities that are not living in a group home or an institution. It's extremely heartwarming and encouraging to see how much is happening. As far as tips for other parents as how to do this, it's tough. It is really tough. You have to be willing to work more than full time, and you have to be willing to accept a lot of rejection and a lot of promises that are going nowhere. It's a very difficult job. And yet, if I weren't doing this, I think I would just sit home and cry every day, because you have to feel that you're doing something. And I think we're making a difference. And I don't know how much of what I'm doing is going to affect my son's life. I hope it will if I live long enough. But it is making a difference. It's got to make a difference. We have to be heard. I think legislators are clueless about what the families of people with disabilities go through and the fears that we live with and how it consumes our lives and how little is out there to reassure us that our children will have a good future. The problem here is that the system, the state, the country really doesn't deal with this issue. So it's basically left to families, and the services that are available for people with disabilities are crazy and not organized and not reliable and not stable. That's the reason I think why parents do what we do. If I felt that my son would be okay when we die without us, I would not be doing all this and I would be enjoying my old age years the way that I'm not.
I feel really grateful to be able to talk to someone like Ginny, because she's a reminder that all of us have a role to play, and together we are much stronger. And as she talked about, it is often that network of people around us that makes things happen. In next week's episode, I'll be speaking to Laura Wells and finding out more about how Hope has developed their inclusive living model, and also talking about how they use community facilitators to ensure that people are not just housed, but are integrated into supportive and engaging communities. I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope that the stories and solutions shared on here help you as you support your young person to create their future. If you know anyone who would find the ideas useful, please share the podcast with them. To support the podcast, please consider finding out more about the Independent Cooking Made Easy online course. It's a safe, simple system that works. There are links to the course in the show notes. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn at Debra Caldow. I'd love to have a conversation with you on any of the topics we all care about. Bye for now.